Are we on the verge of a big market collapse? Hey everybody, welcome back to another beautiful day in real estate. Today we're going to discuss a little bit more about the stock market and what we can be paying attention to. We're going to talk about oil, going to talk about gold, and at the end we will talk a little bit about real estate. I know that this channel is specifically supposed to be for real estate, but as we dove down the rabbit hole, it started to get more and more focused on the economics and understanding the economy as a whole. So let's jump right into the charts as we do. First off, let's talk about SpaceX. For SpaceX, we were on our video 3 days ago talking about how we started to feel like it was a bottom after a 50% retracement. If you would have followed that call, you would be up about 20% because we were looking at that right around that 110 to 115 mark. So, and it sits at 133 as of today. We had two major candles bounce right off the top. Two major candles, strong ones, bounce right off of that support, which is now becoming that new support zone. As you can kind of tell, we had the major fall off, and then you start to see a little bit of consolidation. Tries to break below a couple of times. The wicks were short, and now we're starting to see more volume come back into the stock. More than likely, what's going to happen is you're going to see that this stock is going to slightly tick up, and then it's going to come back down again. It's not going to make a V pattern and go straight up. That's another mistake that most investors make when it comes to IPOs is they buy into a stock just because it's down. And you're going to have these swing traders and short-term traders that are going to come in. They're going to flood the market because there's no buy orders. And then they flood the market, run the price up slightly, take their profits, and then the retail investor falls down the crack. So be careful with SpaceX right now. Be careful because it doesn't matter. Right now, I'm not even talking about the company. I'm talking about the technicals behind it. All right. So more than likely, you're going to see this bounce. It could see 149, hypothetically. That was kind of a support. Again, there's not much data to really go off of yet because it is such a new product or such a new stock. Somebody commented on my video, said that they've been working since 2011, but they IPO'd most recent. They were IPO'd this year. When did we IPO on this one? It wasn't due end of June, was it? Yeah. Middle of June. Okay. So far we're about almost 2 months into this stock sitting here, and we saw the pump up, which is the hype. Then it comes down. You see a little bit again. Same thing kind of happens here, right? So this is a smaller version of what you'll see on bigger charts, but basically the hype comes in, the insiders or the bigger investors sell, retail investors buy that dip thinking it's just a dip, finds a little bit of consolidation, retail investors get scared. Then you have that tiny push up from those traders, those swing traders, those short-term traders, and then it breaks down and it finds a new major bottom, which is where we're at now. As you can kind of tell, major volume, flat volume, volume starts to come in again. So be careful with this one, but it is starting to show some possibilities of seeing some upward action. But I mean, 20%, man, in 2 days is actually a pretty solid move in the stock market. So those of you out there, be careful, trade safe, but we'll move on to our next. Oil. Oil is our next talking point, you guys, as always, because why? Everything in the economy is shaped around oil at this point, right? Everything, every decision the Fed makes, every war decision that we've seen is all based on the fact of where is oil at, right? So why is this so important? Well, first off, oil is in every product that we use. Anything down from your shirt to your car to your shoes. Oil is in thousands of products. It's not just what goes into your car. So people are always focusing on the oil prices for gasoline purposes, right? Gasoline goes up because oil goes up, and that's what we pay attention to. But the main thing that we need to be focusing on is, why is oil so important? Well, just because it is a major pillar in our economy with majority of our products, right? So oil moves the entire economy. It moves inflation, it moves predictability, it moves tons of things that shape the way that we move forward as a society in an economic perspective, right? So we were on here on Wednesday talking about oil. Oil did find its lower high, as we talked about. Remember, we talked about the higher high, the lower high, and then we started to find a bottom, which is right here. We were supposedly signing a deal with Iran, and then right after that, they said F that, and then bombs started flying again. Here we go. Okay, peace deal's almost in place, and now we fell off a cliff again. However, nobody's really confident. It doesn't matter if you're a trader or a retail investor. It doesn't matter. Nobody believes what's coming out of the mouth of these people right now talking about the ending of the war. Until we see it, I'm not going to lose sleep over it personally. I just think that we have a lot of things that need to be factored in yet. So right now we're starting to see this is kind of forming a bit of a resistance point, right? So hypothetically, right? Let's talk hypotheticals because that's what we need to be paying attention to, right? Because if we're going to be talking about the future, there's no guarantee. There's just the technicals in this perspective, right? So it is showing a bit of a downward trend, right? I mean, we're not talking about channels. We're just talking about the consistency of a straight line. Is it bouncing off of it, and what's happening, right? So let's get this a little more accurate. There we go. Hold on a second here. It's gonna drive me nuts if it's not correct. So there we go. All right. So anyhow, as you can tell, we found that top, right? Tried to break above it, didn't happen, broke down. Now we're retesting that trend line, right? This is again not going to be to scale, right? I'm just paying attention. This is a way that you can kind of interpret things. But when you see this, right, more than likely, and we formed a little bit of a bottom, not much volume popping out of it. However, right now there's a good possibility that it could pump up and maybe hit that 92, 95 bucks a barrel, somewhere in there, and find a resistance again and come back down. From the setup of things, though, you know, the stochastic RSI is finding its bottom. The RSI still is at 50. So, I mean, there is possibility for it to keep moving up in the short term. I don't expect a long term. For those of you that are wondering, spot Brent crude oil is the chart we're paying attention to right now, and it is on the daily. So same thing with WTI crude oil. Again, the very similar movements, right? Very similar movements. The only difference is that there was more of a major support right around this, 74, 75 range, as you can kind of tell back here, right? On the Brent crude, I didn't have much to go off of, but you can see there was volume here, 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 and here, right? I mean, it's never perfect, right? Because remember with trading, if you're trading, something that people make the mistake on when they're using support and resistances is that they're focusing so much on perfect trades, right? So they expect it to hit that line and go straight up, right? Sometimes it's going to go slightly below, sometimes it's going to go slightly above. In this particular case, it was literally almost on the nut at 74 bucks a barrel and bounced up. So if we're going back and forth, right, again, so we're going to look at technicals from both charts, right? So we do have a major support technically, right? I mean, right here we had it, here, like in the most recent, we have 3 spots that confirm this is going to be a support slash resistance point, right? Stochastic RSI found its bottom, went a little bit lower. Again, now I'm pointing at this and seeing this, the stochastic being below that 24 range or that 20 range is oversold, right? That means that we just haven't seen hold on. Ooh, I want to look at that. Hold on a second here. Let's pull this all the way across real quick. All right. So, I mean, if we're following this trend line, this downward trend line, it did break above it, right? We saw the high, and then it fell back down, and it needs to break above that 20 in order to really give it some movement to go, right? The RSI still is in its downward trend that from the line we had drawn previously. Good Lord, I can't talk today. But again, not perfect, but basically what we need to be paying attention to. Let's just kick this back slightly, right? So even if it did break above this trend line, it's falling right back down again. There's not very much strong movement or volume from what I am seeing. So more than likely over the weekend, beginning of next week, over the weekend, we might hear some news that's going to move the market. Beginning of next week, we might see a slight pump just because it's going to be more of a trader's market than it is going to be an investor's market. Possibly, right? But we did bounce off of that, so it might see another push up. It could bounce off that 79 bucks a barrel and just make its way down. There's really not a whole lot of news that I've seen most recent that's going to change the way that oil is moving. But again, oil is really at the mercy of the news, meaning that more than likely you're going to see it move based off of the news more than the technicals. The technicals are still there and they're a little bit more hidden at that point, but there is possibility, right? So when I'm looking at something like this, the major points that I'm going to be paying attention to if it does break above this 79 is going to be more close to that 88 to, that $94 a barrel, right? If it breaks above this, then we could be moving towards a trend upward again, right? We found a major bottom, we saw a high, we got down. So let's see. From this local high down to the bottom was a 30% retracement, and then from there to here, 38% increase, right? Now, and then how far down did we drop? And then another 19% drop. So honestly, this is right now. Again, we saw this is honestly a pretty insane chart to me because it almost perfectly follows that downward trend action, right? I mean, almost, not quite, right? But it does pose a question, right? Because hypothetically right now, and I'm wondering, well, since we're on it here, let's just I don't really like that. No, I don't think that's worth it. But anyways, we're showing again higher high, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, right? Trying to break it above that trend line, and then it comes back down. More than likely, we're going to see some movement up. I don't know what we're going to hear in the news, but I'm guessing we're going to probably see something here in the next couple of days. But that's kind of where we're at with the charts. Everything's kind of in limbo right now. It's a interesting market to trade in, right? When there's more strong technicals behind it, you feel more confident. I personally don't feel as confident with this particular setup, and that's a mistake that a lot of traders make. Like, we get into something, we think we are confident, but when you have to have that gut feeling like, this is an 80% or better, right? Anyhow, pay attention to oil. That's what's going to move things. If oil prices come down, inflation will come down, more probability for a rate cut. And for homebuyers out there, they need that rate cut right now. The market is slowed tremendously in the month of July. It typically slows down, but it almost flatlined. Like, I'm still moving stuff. We still have listings coming up. Like, things are still moving, but the market is not confident. The market is extremely unconfident with where we're sitting because right now, everybody feels like everything's super expensive. Inflation's high. There's uncertainty with the war. You have, the new Fed president who's talking about potentially raising rates, which he hasn't really said, but the probabilities continue to stack up, right? I mean, he was a little bit more hawkish on his main speech when he came out talking about keeping inflation under control, which is very important, et cetera, et cetera. But people are not confident. And when people are not confident, they're not going to buy. But that also leads me to believe this, right? So I'm going to be optimistic. I think that a blow off top could potentially happen in the stock market yet, and I think if the Clarity Act passes, right, because they were supposed to vote on it today. Now they're supposed to go to their summer recess. I'm talking about the U.S. senators. They're supposed to go to their summer recess. Some senators are saying, axe that. Let's finish what we're doing here. But essentially, until we get that passed, crypto is pretty much going to stay where it's at. And, oh, man, bounced that right off. Whoopsies. Crypto's going to stay exactly where it's at. Sorry, I don't edit my videos, you guys. I just roll with them. I'm not even worried about it. If you like what you like and follow. If not too worried about it. Anyway, if they stay into their summer recess, there's a possibility of the Clarity Act being presented. However, the problem that we witnessed most recent was that it's continuously getting pushback. Russia just signed its legislation to make cryptocurrencies be regulated. This is a very important piece to the economy puzzle that a lot of people overlook because we need a new software update for banking systems, for technology, for the way we operate selling homes. These are due for major upgrades. They're still very paper-based. They're very, everything's very slow moving in the real estate world. So the Clarity Act doesn't even necessarily just regulate the cryptocurrencies. It starts to regulate a technology that will expand across all sectors. See, people correlate AI and cryptocurrency in two separate different discussions, right? Now, cryptocurrency, you're talking about Bitcoin. You're talking about something that can be regulated by the CFTC because it can be considered a commodity, right? If it's considered a commodity, there's no company behind it. It's literally a product that we give value to, right? So gold is worth $4,000 an ounce, I think, right about now. Why? Because we, as people, believe that it's worth that, right? It's not, it adds value from a perspective of jewelry or, whatever. People buy gold bars and put it in their safe. There's value behind it, right? It's a material. So if we talk about regulating Bitcoin, the CFTC can come in and take care of that because it's considered a commodity, right? And the CFTC has talked about that before. But what I'm actually talking about is I'm talking about blockchain technology. I'm talking about cross-chain protocols. I'm talking about DeFi. I'm talking about centralized finance and decentralized finance, a system where banks are pushing aggressively against that Crypto Clarity Act because it would mean that more people could put their money in a crypto exchange and actually earn a yield of 4 and 5% on their money rather than putting it into a bank where they're going to make 0.03%. That's why we see continuous resistance, right? Because we are due for an upgrade. Banks don't want that because if we go to an upgrade, that means they're going to lose depositors, they're going to lose money, the companies aren't going to show as profitable, et cetera, right? And you can listen to JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon talk about this in an interview. He literally said, we're fighting this tooth and nail. And the reason is he says it's not safe, right? But if those of you that are paying attention, we understand it's safe, but until that comes into play to regulate how that works, we're not going to be able to update the systems that we use, right? When we're talking about, we've talked about it previously in videos a long time ago, but if we're talking about like a deed for a house, right? Going digital with a deed for a house. That's what Chainlink offers. It's a credible protocol that you can now track your data on the blockchain. And the unique thing about that is in some cases with cars, like Chainlink posted this, I don't know, probably 9 months ago, but it was basically showing a Tesla and it was showing the current data in real time, meaning you can track how many tire changes on there, oil changes, was it ever in a car accident, et cetera, et cetera. Carfax on steroids, essentially, right? But not only that, but it also tracks what the value of that car is at any given time, you know, per whatever, you know, whatever condition you're going to give that system, right? So stuff like that is very important, right? If you have a house where it's a digital deed, which we're moving towards title insurance, right? Which title insurance is basically a digital deed that's held on the cloud at a title company saying that you own the property. You don't have to hold a thick stack of abstract paperwork anymore in a safe where it gets musty, moldy, and falls apart, right? So these products are very important to a newer society that's going to be more efficient, create more jobs, gives more opportunity for people. And until that Clarity Act passes, everything is in kind of a standstill. And those of you that are paying attention, those are the major headlines. So people think of the Clarity Act or you know, they hear cryptocurrency, they shoot to Bitcoin, neglecting to realize the technology base behind blockchain, which is really what we're trying to get at. Decentralized finance, where people can come in and say, here's a pool of money, you can borrow this money from me, pay me an interest rate, and then pay me back. Offering the same concept as a bank without needing the intermediary, without the fees, without the delays, without the restrictions. The DeFi, or the presenter of the cash flow, the capital itself, is now in the authority of the person putting it into the pot, right? And they have to agree with the borrowers. The borrower has to agree with the terms in order to get it, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And again, that's why banks don't want this to happen, because it relieves the opportunity for an intermediary, right? If we went to, and this is just, let's put our Jetsons hat on for just a second here. Let's say that this stuff does passes, and 10 years from now, we're digitalized across the board. That means you're not going to need a wallet. You're going to carry your ID digitally. Your money's going to be digital. Your deed for your car, title for your car, deed for your home. All of these things will be digital. And that is the world we're moving to, digital, right? We have influencers, which is one of the most predominant jobs. Is why I created this channel, right? Because you need to be in front of people, and authenticity drives that. But without getting on a tangent, that's what we need to be paying attention to right now. Is the Clarity Act going to pass? Because that Clarity Act is going to dictate the way that we make the next major steps in our economy. And a lot of people don't want to look at that, and I totally understand. It's new, it's uncomfortable, it's not the normal. But the new product that comes in, I'm going to reference the internet for a second. The internet came in, you had tons of hype, and this correlates with AI. Blockchain can correlate with AI, right? Both of those systems can correlate and coexist, okay? Because smart contracts are basically contracts that can operate without me sitting behind a computer saying, hey, this is good, right? When you sell a product, the money's deposited, the product's here, both the smart contract says until both of these are submitted and verified, the transaction can happen, and then when it happens, everything goes together. So there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle that are going to drive us into production to become a very predominant country once again. And I say that because we have lost a lot of credibility over the last 50 years. A whole nother conversation for another day, but I wanted to pay attention. Those of you out there, watch and pay attention to the Clarity Act. It's going to be very important for the next 5 to 10 years in real estate, in the economy, in finance. It's going to shift the way that we operate. So if you liked what you saw, again, make sure to like and follow. Thanks. Have a blessed weekend, and we'll see you Monday.